In today's lesson, we will be discussing volume. What is volume? Volume is the number of cubic units needed to fill a space. So what exactly is a cubic unit? Whenever you are solving a volume problem, your answer will always contain cubed units. So for example, if we are measuring a shape in centimeters, we will, in the answer, whenever we solve for volume, it will be centimeters cubed. Or if we are solving a problem that is using millimeters for the measurements, our answer will contain millimeters cubed. So rectangular prism is one of the shapes we will be discussing today, and it is a solid figure that has 6 faces that are all rectangles. Opposite faces are congruent and parallel. So let's talk about some real-world examples of a rectangular prism. So one example that we see very often would be a box of cereal, and we can see that it follows all the rules of a rectangle prism. Also, a Kleenex box is an example of a rectangular prism, or even a deck of cards. These are all examples of a rectangular prism. Okay, now we will be discussing cube. So a cube is a solid figure that has 6 faces that are all squares. All faces are congruent and parallel. So if we are going to look at some real-world examples of a cube, so the most common would probably be a Rubik's Cube. Then we have a picture of dice, and you can see that those are a cube shape, that they follow the definition of a cube, and have the 6 faces, and they're all squares and all congruent and parallel. And lastly, we have ice cubes, would be another real world example. So if we wanted to find the volume for a rectangular prism or for a cube, there is a formula that we have to follow. And the formula is length times width times height. So if we look at this rectangular prism, we see the length, the width, and the height. So if we see a shape and we can determine those 3 measurements, we can easily find the volume of that shape by multiplying length times width times height. Okay, the volume of a rectangular prism. Let's look at an example here. So if we have this rectangular prism and the length is 8 centimeters, the width is 4 centimeters, and the height is 4 centimeters. So how can we set that up? So if we go back to the formula we just learned, we know that it's length, which would be 8, times the width, which would be 4, times the height. So we're going to have a problem that looks like this: 8 times 4 times 4, because that's our length times width times 4, and that's going to give us the volume of this rectangular prism. So if we multiply 8 times 4, we are going to come up with 32, and then we will still need to multiply that 32 times 4 to get the volume. So if we multiply 32 times 4, we come up with 128. So are we done once we multiply our length times width times height? And the answer is no, because our answer is missing something. We're missing the units that we are measuring this rectangular prism in, and that is centimeters. And we have already discussed how whenever we are finding the volume for an object, it's always going to be that measurement of unit cubed. So the answer to this rectangular prism, the volume of it is 128 centimeters cubed. So if we look at the volume of a cube, so we have this cube here, and if we look, we're going to use the same formula, length times width times height, and we see that our length is 1, our width is 1, and our height is 1. So whenever we set this equation up, we will have 1 times 1 times 1, because we're just going to plug those units of measurements directly into that formula. And that is going to give us the volume of this cube. So if we multiply 1 times 1, we're going to get 1, and then we will still need to multiply that by the height, which is 1 as well.